just brought up Tucker Carlson, for example. You have Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, someone who very much has President Trump's ear. She's raising concerns about this. So he has to come out with some sort of clear and concise message at some point.
I'm going to stop smiling because we're going to talk about Iran. And we're going to be joined by Julia Manchester, who's the national political reporter at The Hill and a welcome and frequent visitor to this programme. Hello to you, Julia.
Hello, John. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Tell me how this is looking from your side. We've had a string of social media postings from President Trump. The last one, directed at Iran, simply said unconditional surrender. What do you reckon is the direction of travel here, Julia?
Yeah, I think a lot of cryptic messages from President Trump over the last 24 hours or so since he's left the G7. And he's now also saying the U.S. now, quote, controls, or we control the skies over Iran. So unclear whether he means the U.S. and Israel, just the U.S. But, he's teetering on a very fine line here between, direct U.S. involvement, or is this the U.S. essentially aiding Israel? Yeah. And he's, from a domestic perspective, he's very much having to walk a very fine line, because you actually have a number of conservatives within the Republican Party. They would call themselves America First, isolationists in many ways, who are going against the president on this, who say they don't want to see, American boots on the ground, American funding going towards this conflict. Yes. In fact, conservative Congressman Thomas Massie has joined with progressive Congressman Ro Khanna to introduce legislation that would require the president to get Congress's approval if he were to enter this conflict, or have the U.S. enter this conflict with Iran. And we know that there are a number of Republicans who are seemingly on board with that. So we understand that the president's going to be meeting, or I think he's already meeting, in the Situation Room at the White House at the moment. So we'll probably get more information as to how this is going to unfold. But President Trump very much taking an aggressive stance towards Iran, towards this situation, and not going in what many people would call the America First route.
Yeah, and the president does seem to be, from what we've seen so far, Julia, leaning towards the Iran hawk side of the MAGA movement. He's had from the journalist Tucker Carlson, for example, who was very strong on air, saying, look, just don't go there. This is not what MAGA's all about. And the Trump side response was pretty much, look, Donald Trump is the architect and the author of MAGA. And America First means taking on a challenge and a threat to the American set of values like Iran.
I've got the Donald Trump quote here from his real Truth Social account. He says, "Somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon." I think a falling out between Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson, that's a falling out to cherish.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, and Tucker Carlson doesn't have the benefit of about $1 squillion in his bank account to sustain him during that confrontation. No. Although he's not, I suppose he doesn't lack a buck or two either. But Julia, Trump left the G7 in Canada saying he was on his way to that Situation Room meeting, which I think, as you say, is going on now, and he would have something much bigger to say than simply supporting the idea of a ceasefire. You don't do all that and then come out of that meeting in the Situation Room and say, status quo, we're just going to carry on watching and waiting, which is why... Julia, go on.
Well, look, I think what we've seen with this administration, maybe a little less so from the first Trump administration, but I think we've certainly seen it with this administration, is that this administration is very chaotic. And we know that President Trump likes to take on a show. But that being said, going to the Situation Room, putting out these posts, this is clearly very, very serious. And you have members of the president's party, and you just brought up Tucker Carlson, for example. You have Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, someone who very much has President Trump's ear. She's raising concerns about this. So he has to come out with some sort of clear and concise message at some point. It's just been so incredibly cryptic, not incredibly cryptic, but I think it's leaving us with a lot of questions right now.
Well, it's been a little bit incoherent. And some in the Trump camp suggest that is a kind of genius, that it's a deliberate strategy of keeping us guessing as to what the president may be thinking. And the alternative interpretation is that it's just incoherent and confused.
Well, we saw that with the tariffs, didn't we? So economic policy rather than foreign policy, although foreign economic policy, I guess you could call it. But we saw there were going to be these tariffs. They're going to be at this rate. Liberation Day is coming. We're going to postpone them. We're not going to postpone them. The deals being worked out all the time. We are going to postpone them. And every single time there were core Trump supporters going, it's all part of the strategy. It's the art of the deal. It's a way of getting people to the table. Look, isn't he a genius? And I think probably we can all agree that it was pretty much chaos and a misunderstanding of the impact on American businesses that was behind all of that. So I would feel much more secure if I felt that there was some kind of slightly chaotic but strategy at the heart of it for send out these signals, get these people around the negotiating table, then we can get them from sort of point A to point B. But I genuinely am not sure, and I would love to be corrected on this by possibly by Tim, but by any of you, that do we know what the core endpoint is it regime change in Iran? Is it just simply to make sure that they are never capable of developing nuclear weapons again, or what does that look like? What is the end game here beyond to just look really tough?
One imagines that Benjamin Netanyahu would love to see regime change, and Donald Trump, as you say, goes at a subject, goes at a policy like a bull at a gate until the gate does not move or the gate pushes back. In a way, gates don't generally do push back, but some of the things that Donald Trump takes on do push back. So the markets push back on tariffs, the migration crackdown, the raids in Los Angeles and elsewhere. That was said to be a prime. There was no surrender there until hospitality and the farming lobby got involved and said, you cannot take our workers, you can't take our hotel workers, you can't take... And so suddenly they were exempted. There's an order from the president that says, go after somebody else. And here in the Middle East, who's calling the shots, as I mentioned before? Is it Benjamin Netanyahu or is it Donald Trump following on behind? I mean, Julia, these are fair points, aren't they? And the consequences, again, they occur before a lot of thought about the consequences sometimes sets in. If there is a full-scale American involvement in raids, future raids on Israel, one thing that's going to happen is there's going to be further disruption in world markets, in the energy market, and that's going to bear on consumers in the USA, on gasoline prices one way or another, isn't it? And that could be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And oftentimes I think when we, just to bring this back to elections, and this might be going sort of off track, but a lot of times there's a question of how much does foreign policy matter in U.S. elections? We have a big midterm election next year. We have a few off-year elections later this year. And usually it doesn't start to matter until you have gasoline prices impact, the prices of goods and services, for example, until you have American boots on the ground. And even then, I would argue, look, after former President Bush, presided over the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. He still won re-election the following year. So, politically, we'll see how this works out for Donald Trump. But going back to foreign policy, it's really interesting because last week, I should say, we were having this conversation about President Trump's relationship with Israel. I mean, is he kind of having Israel go on its own, having Benjamin Netanyahu go on its own? And we saw that statement that Secretary of State Marco Rubio put out following Israel's initial strikes on Iran, believe Thursday evening, essentially saying the U.S. had nothing to do with it. This is Israel protecting itself, et cetera. But now you're seeing the president sort of, I don't want to say do a full 360, but he's taking a much more hawkish interventionist approach. And I think, that's obviously, I would assume, very comforting to someone like Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah. Yes, Tim.
I'm slightly going to paraphrase, but William Hague, the former British Foreign Secretary, had an article in the Times today in which he was pretty clearly that while he wouldn't have started what Israel had started, once you've started it, you might as well finish it off. You've basically destabilised Iran now, but you haven't absolutely destroyed their capabilities. And so having started it, and that's certainly my position, is now finish it off properly. America, I think, should now provide if it doesn't do it itself, should provide the weapons to Israel so that we really do destroy the nuclear capabilities of Iran. Because let's make no mistake, Iran is not just a friend of an enemy of Israel. doesn't just want to wipe Israel off the face of the map. It's a country that has exported terrorism around the world and could do on a much grander scale in the future if we allow it. And, not only recently, there were unarmed women. The Iranian authorities used live ammunition against them because they had the audacity to protest against the way they were treated. So I think, actually, although it's a huge operation, you look at the fact that Israel hasn't attacked the spiritual leaders of Iran, hasn't attacked the oil fields. There is a very focused attempt to get rid of the military leadership of this regime, and I, for one, welcome it wholeheartedly.